Daniel Carter stood alone on the observation deck of the starship. The stars stretched out before him like a million tiny fires burning in the darkness. He had been looking at stars for 7 years now. 7 years since he left Earth. 7 years since he joined the Galactic Coalition as the first human in the Vanguard Corps. He was tired, not the kind of tired that sleep could fix. This was something deeper, something that had been building inside him for a very long time. The door behind him opened with a soft hiss. Daniel did not turn around. He knew who it was by the sound of the footsteps, light and quick. That meant it was the young officer who sometimes talked to him when no one else was watching. "You should be resting," said. "The medical officer said your shoulder needs time to heal." Daniel touched his left shoulder without thinking. The plasma burn still hurt, but he had felt worse, much worse. "I am fine," he said. Moved to stand beside him. The young alien was tall and thin, with pale blue skin and large dark eyes. Like all, he had no hair on his head. His face was smooth and hard to read, but Daniel had learned to see the small changes in expression that others missed. "The commander was wrong to say those things," said quietly. "What she said on the bridge, it was not fair." Daniel said nothing. He just kept looking at the stars. "You saved 17 lives today," continued. 17 of my people, children. You took a plasma bolt to protect them. How can she call you a liability?" "Because she believes it," Daniel said. His voice was calm and flat. "She has always believed it. 7 years I have served on this ship. 7 years I have bled for the Coalition. And to her I am still just a human, a mistake, an animal that somehow learned to wear armor." Was silent for a moment, then he spoke again. "Not everyone thinks like the commander." "No," Daniel agreed, "but enough do, enough that it matters." He finally turned to look at. The young saw something in Daniel's eyes that made him step back. It was not anger. It was not sadness. It was emptiness, like a fire that had burned for too long and was finally running out of fuel. "Why do you do it?" asked. "Why do you keep fighting for people who do not respect you?" Daniel thought about the question. He had asked himself the same thing many times. "When I was a boy on Earth," he said slowly, "my father told me something. He said that a man's worth is not measured by what others think of him. It is measured by what he does when no one is watching, by the choices he makes when it would be easier to walk away." He paused and looked back at the stars. "I do not fight for the commander. I do not fight for respect. I fight because there are people who need help, children who need to go home to their families, soldiers who need someone to watch their backs. That is enough for me. It has to be." Nodded slowly. He did not fully understand, but he respected the answer. "My people do not think like humans," he said. "We do not value emotion. We see it as weakness. But I have watched you, Daniel Carter. I have seen you carry wounded soldiers through fire. I have seen you give your food to hungry refugees. I have seen you sit with dying men so they would not be alone at the end." He looked at Daniel with something that might have been admiration. "That is not weakness. I do not know what to call it, but it is not weakness." Daniel almost smiled, almost. "Thank you." The young officer nodded and turned to leave, but he stopped at the door and looked back. "For what it is worth," he said, "I am glad you are here. That would not be the same without you." Then he was gone, and Daniel was alone again with the stars. He stayed there for a long time, thinking about the past 7 years, thinking about all the battles he had fought, all the blood he had spilled, all the friends he had buried. He remembered his first day on how the crew had looked at him like he was some kind of strange animal, how Commander had made it clear from the beginning that she did not want a human on her ship. He remembered the first time he proved himself, a simple mission that went wrong, a shuttle crash on a hostile moon, 3 officers trapped in the wreckage. Daniel had crawled through twisted metal and fire to pull them out. He had carried the last one on his back for 2 miles through a toxic atmosphere. He thought they would accept him after that. He was wrong. He remembered 9, the colony that came under attack by raiders. Daniel had led the defense when the commanding officer was killed. He held the line for 18 hours with a handful of volunteers. By the end, he was the only one still standing. He had taken 9 wounds and killed 47 enemies. They gave him a medal for that. Commander did not attend the ceremony. He remembered the frozen moon where everything went wrong. A battalion of coalition soldiers trapped behind enemy lines. No one was willing to risk a rescue. No one except Daniel. He went alone, he found them, he brought them home. That was when they gave him the armor, the ceremonial armor of the Vanguard. It was supposed to be the highest honor a soldier could receive. It marked him as a hero of the coalition. But to Commander, it was just metal. Daniel reached up and touched the shoulder plate of his armor. It was cold under his fingers, cold and heavy. He had worn this armor with pride for 3 years. He had believed that it meant something, that he had finally earned his place among the stars. Now he was not so sure. He thought about what it said on the bridge. She had called him a liability. She had said humans were reckless and primitive. She had said the coalition made a mistake letting his kind into the Vanguard. The worst part was that she said it in front of everyone, in front of the crew he had bled for, in front of the soldiers he had saved. Not one of them spoke up, not one of them defended him. Daniel closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He could feel something changing inside him, something breaking. He had given everything to the coalition, his youth, his health, his future. He had sacrificed more than anyone knew, and it was never enough. It would never be enough. He opened his eyes and looked at the stars one last time. Somewhere out there, far beyond the borders of coalition space, was Earth, his home, the place he had left behind 7 years ago, believing he could make a difference among the stars. He was not sure what he believed anymore. But he knew one thing for certain. Something had to change. He could not keep going like this. He could not keep giving pieces of himself to people who did not want them. Tomorrow would be different. He did not know how. He did not know what he would do. But tomorrow would be different. Daniel turned away from the window and walked back to his quarters. The ship was quiet around him. The crew was sleeping. No one saw him pass. No one ever did. The morning came too quickly. Daniel had not slept well. His shoulder was hurting and his mind would not stop turning over the same thoughts again and again. He put on his armor like he did every morning. Each piece fit perfectly. The chest plate with the names of those he had saved. The shoulder guards marked with the crest of the coalition. The gauntlets that had pulled so many soldiers from the edge of death. He looked at himself in the mirror. He looked like a hero, but he did not feel like one. The alarm sounded just as he finished, a distress signal somewhere close. Daniel moved fast. He was on the bridge in less than 3 minutes. Commander was already there, standing at the center console with her hands behind her back. She did not look at him when he entered. "Report," she said to the officer at the communications station. "Civilian transport vessel under attack," the officer replied. "Raider ships, 3 of them. The transport is carrying refugees from the outer colonies, mostly families, many children." "How far?" asked. 20 minutes at full speed." Nodded, set course, all hands to battle stations. The ship came alive around them. Crew members ran to their posts. The engines hummed as they turned toward the distress signal. Daniel stood near the back of the bridge, watching and waiting. He knew what was coming. He had done this many times before. Finally looked at him. Her eyes were cold and distant like always. "Carter," she said, "you will lead the boarding team. Secure the civilians and bring them aboard." "Yes, Commander." There was nothing else to say. There never was. 20 minutes later, they dropped out of faster-than-light travel and found the transport vessel. It was a small ship, old and slow. The raider ships were circling it like wolves around wounded prey. Smoke was pouring from holes in the hull. They opened fire. The raider ships scattered, but they did not run. They were hungry. They wanted their prize. Daniel did not wait for orders. He was already in the shuttle bay, leading a team of 12 soldiers toward the transport. They launched into the chaos of the battle, dodging weapons fire as they approached the damaged ship. The shuttle hit the transport's docking port hard. The doors opened, and Daniel was the first one through. Inside, the transport was dark and full of smoke. Emergency lights flashed red. The sound of weapons fire echoed through the corridors. The raiders had already boarded. "Move fast," Daniel said to his team. "Find the civilians, get them to the shuttle. I will deal with the raiders." His soldiers spread out into the ship. Daniel moved forward alone, toward the sound of gunfire. He found the first group of raiders in the cargo bay. There were 5 of them. They were tall and covered in rough gray skin. Their eyes were black and empty. They carried crude weapons that sparked with energy. Daniel did not hesitate. He raised his rifle and fired. One raider dropped, then another. The remaining 3 turned toward him, screaming in their harsh language. He moved through them like water through rocks. His training took over. Every movement was smooth and precise. Every shot found its target. In less than 30 seconds, all 5 raiders were down. He kept moving. The next corridor was worse. A group of civilians had barricaded themselves in a storage room. Raiders were trying to break down the door. Daniel counted 8 of them. He did not have time for careful tactics. He charged into them, firing as he ran. The raiders turned to face this new threat. One of them hit Daniel with a blast of energy. It struck his shoulder, the same shoulder that was already wounded. The pain was terrible, but Daniel did not stop. He could not stop. There were children behind that door. He fought through the pain. He killed 3 more raiders before his rifle ran out of power. He dropped it and pulled out his combat knife. The remaining raiders surrounded him. They thought they had him trapped. They were wrong. Daniel Carter had been fighting since before these raiders were born. He had killed enemies with his bare hands in places they had never heard of. A few raiders with clubs and energy weapons were not going to stop him. He moved fast, faster than they expected a wounded human to move. The knife flashed in the dim light. One raider fell, then another. The last 2 tried to run, but Daniel caught them before they reached the end of the corridor. When it was over, he stood alone among the bodies. His armor was burned and dented. Blood was running down his arm from the wound in his shoulder. He could barely lift his left hand. But he was still standing. He walked to the storage room door and knocked. "Coalition Vanguard," he said, "you are safe now." The door opened slowly. A woman looked out at him with wide, frightened eyes. Behind her, Daniel could see children huddled together in the darkness. 17 of them, small and scared and looking at him like he was some kind of monster. "Come with me," Daniel said. "My ship will take you somewhere safe." The woman hesitated. She looked at the bodies on the floor. She looked at Daniel's bloody armor. She looked at his face. He did not know what she saw there, but after a moment she nodded. "Thank you," she whispered. Daniel led them through the ship, back toward the shuttle. His team had found more survivors along the way. By the time they reached the docking port, there were almost 50 civilians following them. The raiders tried one more attack as they were boarding the shuttle. Daniel stayed at the rear, holding the corridor while the civilians escaped. He took another hit, this time to his leg, but he did not fall. He was the last one on the shuttle. The doors closed behind him and they launched back toward The battle was over by the time they docked. The raider ships had retreated. The transport vessel was too damaged to save, but the people were alive. That was what mattered. Daniel walked the civilians to the medical bay himself. He made sure every child was with their family. He made sure everyone had food and water. Only when the last refugee was settled did he allow himself to lean against a wall and close his eyes. His shoulder was on fire. His leg was numb. He had lost more blood than he wanted to think about. But he had saved them. 17 children would go home to their families because he had refused to give up. The mission debrief happened 2 hours later. Daniel stood at attention in the briefing room, surrounded by the senior officers of the commander sat at the head of the table, reviewing the reports on her screen. Daniel expected silence. He expected to be dismissed without a word like always. He had learned not to hope for anything more. But this time was different. Looked up from her screen. Her eyes found Daniel and stayed there. "The rescue was successful," she said. "All civilians recovered. No coalition casualties." Daniel nodded. "Yes, Commander." There was a long pause. The other officers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Then spoke again. "This operation was reckless," she said. Her voice was cold and sharp. "You charged into enemy fire with no regard for proper tactics. You engaged multiple hostiles alone instead of waiting for support. You put yourself in unnecessary danger." Daniel felt something twist in his chest, but he kept his face still. "The civilians were in immediate danger," he said. "There was no time to wait." "There is always time for proper procedure," replied. "That is what separates soldiers from animals." The word hung in the air like a poison. Stood up and walked around the table until she was standing directly in front of Daniel. "I have watched you for 7 years," she said. "I have seen you throw yourself into danger again and again. I have seen you bleed and suffer and call it heroism." She shook her head slowly. "It is not heroism. It is desperation. It is a primitive need for approval. You want so badly for us to accept you that you are willing to die for it." Daniel said nothing. He could not find any words. "You are a liability to this ship," continued. "Your reckless behavior puts the entire crew at risk. The coalition made a mistake allowing humans into the Vanguard, and I made a mistake allowing you to stay on my ship." She turned to address the room. "Let this be a lesson to everyone. Emotion is weakness. Desperation is weakness. These are human traits and they have no place among the stars." The silence that followed was absolute. Every officer in the room stared straight ahead. No one looked at Daniel. No one spoke in his defense. Daniel stood there, bleeding through his bandages, and felt something inside him finally break. The briefing room was silent. Everyone was watching Daniel, waiting to see what the human would do. Some of them expected him to argue. Others thought he might shout or lose his temper. That was what humans did, after all. They were emotional creatures who could not control themselves. But Daniel did something no one expected. He took a deep breath and let it out slowly. The anger he felt was still there, burning in his chest like hot metal, but he pushed it down. He had spent 7 years learning to push it down. Then he reached up to his shoulder and unclasped the first piece of his armor. The sound was small, just a soft click of metal releasing, but in the silence of the room it seemed as loud as a gunshot. Commander's eyes narrowed. "What are you doing?" Daniel did not answer. He removed the shoulder guard and set it on the floor at her feet. It landed with a heavy thump. The crest of the coalition gleamed under the harsh lights. He moved to the other shoulder. Click, thump. "Carter said," her voice was sharper now, "I did not give you permission to remove your armor." Daniel still did not speak. He reached for the clasps on his chest plate. The other officers shifted in their seats. They did not understand what was happening. The armor of the Vanguard was sacred. It was the highest honor the coalition could give. No one simply took it off and dropped it on the floor. The chest plate came free. Daniel held it in his hands for a moment, looking at the names engraved on the surface. Each name was someone he had saved. Soldiers, civilians, children, people who would have died without him. He set it down gently, almost with respect. The gauntlets were next, then the leg guards, then the boots with their reinforced plating. Piece by piece, Daniel Carter stripped away 7 years of service, 7 years of blood and sacrifice, 7 years of being the best soldier he could be, only to be told it was never enough. When the last piece fell, he stood before them in nothing but his simple uniform. The scars on his arms were visible now, burns from plasma weapons, cuts from combat knives, a long, jagged line across his forearm where a piece of shrapnel had torn through his flesh on 9. His body was a map of everything he had given to the Coalition. Commander stared at the pile of armor at her feet. Her face was unreadable, but something flickered in her eyes, something that might have been confusion or doubt. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded. Daniel looked at her. His eyes were calm, empty, like a sky with no stars. "You said I do not belong here," he said. His voice was quiet but steady. "You said the armor does not fit me, that I am just a human pretending to be something more." He gestured at the metal on the floor. "Take it back. Give it to someone who deserves it, someone you respect." His jaw tightened. "This is childish behavior. You are proving my point about human emotions." "No," Daniel said. "I am giving you what you want. You have wanted me gone since the day I arrived. Now you have your wish." He turned and started walking toward the door. "I did not dismiss you," called after him. "You will return to your post immediately." Daniel stopped. He stood with his back to her, his shoulders straight and his head held high. "I am done," he said. "I have given you everything I have, my strength, my blood, my years, and it was never enough. It will never be enough. I understand that now." He turned his head slightly, just enough to look at her over his shoulder. "Find someone else to bleed for you." Then he walked out of the briefing room and did not look back. The corridor outside was empty. Daniel's footsteps echoed off the metal walls as he walked. He did not know where he was going. He just knew he could not stay in that room any longer. He ended up at the observation deck again. The same place he had stood the night before, looking at the stars and wondering what would happen next. Now he knew. He sat down on the cold floor and leaned back against the window. The stars were bright and beautiful and impossibly far away. For the first time in 7 years, Daniel Carter allowed himself to feel. The pain came first, not the physical pain from his wounds, though that was still there. This was something deeper, a pain that had been building inside him for years, pushed down and locked away because there was no time for it. There was always another mission, another battle, another life to save. He had told himself that the work was enough, that saving lives was its own reward, that he did not need respect or gratitude or acceptance. He had been lying to himself. The truth was that it hurt, every dismissal, every cold look, every time someone talked about him like he was not there, every time he gave everything and received nothing in return. He was not a machine. He was a human being, and human beings needed to be seen, to be valued, to be told that they mattered. Daniel had never gotten any of that from the Coalition. Not from the officers who watched him save their lives and then turned away without a word. Not from the system that gave him medals and then treated him like a useful tool. He had spent 7 years trying to earn their respect, trying to prove that humans deserved a place among the stars. But you could not earn respect from people who had already decided you were worthless. You could not prove yourself to people who refused to see. Daniel sat in the darkness and let the pain wash over him. He did not fight it. He did not try to push it down. He just let it be. After a long time, he heard footsteps behind him. "I thought I would find you here." It was. The young officer walked across the observation deck and sat down on the floor next to Daniel. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "The whole ship is talking about what happened," finally said. "No one knows what to think." "There is nothing to think about," Daniel replied. "I am done. I will request a transfer back to Earth. They will probably be happy to see me go. Shook his head slowly. I do not believe that. It does not matter what you believe. It is the truth. They sat in silence again. Outside the window, the stars continued to burn. My grandmother used to tell me stories, said suddenly. Stories about the old times before my people joined the coalition. She said that in those days we were different. We felt things more deeply. We were not afraid of emotion. Daniel looked at him. What happened? We decided that emotion was inefficient. That logic was better. We trained ourselves to suppress our feelings, to think only with our minds. It made us better soldiers, better workers, better citizens. Paused. But sometimes I wonder if we lost something important, something that we cannot get back. Daniel did not know what to say to that. He just waited. When I watch you, continued, I see someone who feels everything, every death, every victory, every insult and every kindness. You carry all of it with you and you keep going anyway. He looked at Daniel with something that might have been envy. My people call that weakness, but I think maybe it is strength, a kind of strength that we have forgotten how to have. Daniel let out a long breath. It does not feel like strength right now. No, agreed. I suppose it would not. He reached into his uniform and pulled out a small metal object. It was the crest of the Vanguard, the symbol that Daniel had worn on his armor. You dropped this, said. I thought you might want it back. Daniel looked at the crest in his hand. Such a small thing, but it represented everything he had worked for, everything he had given. Keep it, he said. I do not need it anymore. Did not argue. He put the crest back in his pocket and stood up. I hope you change your mind, he said. The needs you, even if the commander cannot see it. Then he walked away, leaving Daniel alone with the stars. Daniel stayed on the observation deck for a long time. He watched the stars slowly shift as the ship moved through space. He thought about Earth and the life he had left behind. He thought about the future and what it might hold. He did not have any answers, but for the first time in 7 years he was not looking for them. He was just existing, just being, just breathing. Tomorrow he would file his transfer request. Tomorrow he would begin the long journey back to Earth. But tonight he would just sit here and watch the stars. It was enough. It had to be enough. 3 days passed. Daniel stayed in his quarters and did not come out. He had filed his transfer request on the first morning, and the system had accepted it without comment. In 2 weeks, a transport ship would arrive to take him back to Earth. 2 weeks. That was all the time he had left among the stars. He spent most of those days sleeping. His body needed rest. His wounds needed time to heal. But more than that, his mind needed quiet. For 7 years, he had been running from one mission to the next, never stopping, never resting. Now he finally had time to just be still. It was strange. He had expected to feel relieved. Instead, he felt hollow, like someone had scooped out everything inside him and left only an empty shell. On the second day, someone knocked on his door. Daniel did not answer. The knocking stopped after a few minutes. On the third day, the knocking came again. This time it did not stop. Daniel finally got up and opened the door, was standing in the corridor, looking nervous. I need to show you something, the young officer said. Please. Daniel wanted to say no. He wanted to close the door and go back to his bed, but something in his voice made him hesitate. What is it? He asked. The crew, they are watching the mission logs, all of them, they need to see. Daniel did not understand. See what? You said simply, they need to see you. Against his better judgment, Daniel followed through the ship. They walked through corridors that Daniel knew well, past doors he had walked through 1,000 times. Everything looked the same, but something felt different. The crew members they passed looked at Daniel with expressions he did not recognize. They reached the main recreation area. It was the largest open space on the ship, where the crew came to relax and socialize. Usually it was noisy and crowded. Today it was silent. Nearly 100 crew members were gathered there. They stood in groups, facing the large screen on the far wall. On the screen, a video was playing. Daniel recognized it immediately. It was footage from the mission on 9. He watched himself on the screen, 4 years younger, carrying a wounded soldier through a burning building. The soldier was twice his size, but Daniel did not slow down. He kept moving, even as the ceiling collapsed around him. He kept moving until he reached safety. The video cut to another recording. The frozen moon. Daniel was fighting alone against a group of enemy soldiers, buying time for a battalion of coalition troops to escape. He was outnumbered 10-1. He did not retreat. Another video. A hospital ship near the border. Daniel visiting the families of soldiers who had died under his command. He sat with a widow and held her hand while she cried. He told her that her husband had been brave, that he had died protecting others, that she should be proud of him. More videos, mission after mission, year after year, Daniel saving lives, Daniel risking everything, Daniel giving pieces of himself that he would never get back. The crew watched in silence. Some of them had been there for these missions. They had seen these things happen, but seeing them all together, one after another, was different. It told a story that none of them had understood before. Had gathered every record he could find, every report, every video log, every piece of evidence that showed who Daniel Carter really was. The final video was from 3 days ago, the rescue of the civilian transport. The camera showed Daniel fighting through the raiders, taking hit after hit, refusing to fall. It showed him standing alone in a corridor full of bodies, blood running down his arm, waiting by the door to tell 17 frightened children that they were safe. The screen went dark. For a long moment no one moved, no one spoke. Then one of the officers stepped forward. It was Lieutenant Commander, a senior who had served on the for over 20 years. She had never spoken to Daniel directly. He was not sure she even knew his name. She walked up to Daniel and stopped in front of him. Her face was serious, unreadable. "I did not know," she said. Her voice was quiet but clear. "I did not know what you had done, what you had given." Daniel did not know how to respond. "It was my duty," he said. "No," shook her head. "It was more than duty. I have seen soldiers do their duty. I have never seen anyone do what you have done." She reached up and touched her chest, right over her heart. It was an old gesture, a sign of deep respect. "I am sorry," she said. "I am sorry that we did not see you, that we did not value what you gave us." Daniel felt something move in his chest, something that had been frozen for a very long time. Other crew members stepped forward. One by one, they approached Daniel and made the same gesture. Some of them spoke. Others just looked at him and nodded. A few of them had tears in their eyes. He had never seen a cry before. An older officer named pushed through the crowd. Daniel remembered him. Had been one of the soldiers trapped in the wreckage of the shuttle crash 7 years ago. Daniel had pulled him out of the fire and carried him to safety. "You saved my life," said. His voice was rough with emotion. "I never thanked you. I was too proud, too stupid. But you saved my life and I have never forgotten." He grabbed Daniel's hand and held it tight. "Thank you," he said. "Thank you for not giving up on us." Daniel looked around the room. All these faces, all these people who had ignored him for years, who had treated him like he was nothing, who had watched in silence while Commander tore him apart. Now they were finally seeing him, finally understanding. It should have felt good. It should have been everything he wanted. But it was not enough, not anymore. "I appreciate this," Daniel said slowly. "All of it, but it does not change anything." The room went quiet. "For 7 years I have given everything I have to this ship, to the coalition, to all of you, and for 7 years I have been invisible, a tool, a useful animal that you tolerated because I was good at fighting." He paused and took a breath. 3 days ago, your commander called me a mistake. She said humans do not belong among the stars. She said it in front of all of you, and not one person spoke up. Not one person defended me. The crew members looked at each other. Some of them looked ashamed. I understand why, Daniel continued. I do. She is your commander. You follow her orders. That is how it works, but it still hurt. It will always hurt. He looked at who was standing near the back of the crowd. This is a good thing you have done, showing them the truth, making them see. But you cannot undo 7 years of silence with one afternoon of videos. He turned and started walking toward the door. Wait, called out, where are you going? Daniel stopped but did not turn around. I am going back to my quarters. In 2 weeks, a transport will come and take me back to Earth. That is where I belong, not here, not among people who had to watch videos to remember that I was a person. He walked out of the room. Behind him, the crew of the stood in silence. They had seen the truth. They had understood, but they had understood too late. Sometimes that was how it worked. Sometimes people did not realize what they had until it was already gone. Back in his quarters, Daniel sat on his bed and stared at the wall. He could hear sounds in the corridor outside, footsteps, voices. The ship was alive with conversation for the first time in days. They were talking about him, he knew that. They were finally seeing him. But he was tired, so tired. He lay down and closed his eyes. Maybe tomorrow would be different. Maybe the crew's change of heart would mean something. Maybe would finally see what everyone else was starting to understand. Or maybe nothing would change. Maybe he would still leave in 2 weeks and never come back. Either way, he was too tired to care right now. Sleep came quickly. For the first time in days, Daniel did not dream. The attack came without warning. Daniel was sleeping when the alarm started. The sound was different from the usual alerts, louder, more urgent. He knew immediately that something was very wrong. He was out of bed and running before he was fully awake. His body moved on instinct, carrying him through the corridors toward the bridge. He was not wearing his armor. He did not have any weapons, but none of that mattered. The ship needed him. He reached the bridge just as a massive explosion rocked the lights flickered. Crew members stumbled and fell. On the main screen, Daniel saw what they were facing. A warship, one of the biggest he had ever seen. They were an old enemy of the coalition. Daniel had fought them many times over the years. He had even negotiated a ceasefire with them once when all the diplomats had failed. But this ship was not interested in talking. Shields are failing, someone shouted. We cannot take much more of this. Commander stood at the center of the bridge, giving orders. Her voice was calm and steady, but Daniel could see the tension in her shoulders. She knew they were in trouble. Prepare to evacuate, she said. All hands to escape pods. Commander, an officer replied. The escape pod systems are damaged. We can only launch half of them. The words hung in the air. Half. That meant half the crew would be trapped on the ship when it was destroyed. Closed her eyes for just a moment. When she opened them, her face was hard as stone. Priority evacuation for essential personnel, she said. Everyone else will have to wait for rescue. Daniel stepped forward. Let me help. Turned to look at him. Her expression did not change. You are no longer on active duty, she said. Return to your quarters and wait for evacuation. We both know that is not going to happen, Daniel replied. You need every person you can get right now, including me. They stared at each other. The ship shook again as another blast hit the hull. Fine, said finally. Do what you want, you always do. Daniel nodded and turned to leave the bridge. He had a plan. It was a stupid plan. It would probably get him killed. But it was the only chance they had. He ran to the shuttle bay. His old combat shuttle was still there, sitting in the corner where he had left it months ago. He had spent countless hours repairing and upgrading it. It was fast and tough, but it was no match for a warship. That did not matter. He was not planning to fight. Daniel climbed into the shuttle and powered up the systems. Everything was working. The engines hummed with energy. The controls felt familiar under his hands. He opened a communication channel. "This is Carter. I am launching from Shuttle Bay 2. Do not follow me." His voice came through the speaker. "Carter, what are you doing?" "Drawing their fire. They want a target. I am going to give them one." "That is suicide. You cannot outrun a warship in that shuttle." "I am not planning to outrun them. I am planning to talk to them." There was a long pause, then spoke again, her voice different somehow, softer. "Why, after everything that has happened, after everything I said, why would you die for us?" Daniel thought about the question. He thought about 7 years of service, 7 years of being invisible, 7 years of giving everything and getting nothing in return. Then he thought about the 17 children he had saved, the soldiers he had carried through fire, the families he had visited to tell them their loved ones died as heroes. "Because it is who I am," he said. "Because there are people on that ship who need help, and because protecting others is not something I do for rewards or respect, it is just what I do." He closed the channel and launched. The shuttle shot out of the bay and headed straight for the warship. On the screens, Daniel could see the massive vessel turning toward him. Its weapons were charging. He opened a new channel, one he had not used in years. "Vessel, this is Daniel Carter of the Galactic Coalition. I am requesting a direct communication with your commander." For a long moment, there was no response. The warship continued to close the distance. Its weapons were locked onto Daniel's shuttle. Then a voice crackled through the speaker. It was deep and rough, like rocks grinding together. "Daniel Carter, the human who kills, I know your name." "Then you know I do not make threats," Daniel replied. "And you know I keep my word." "What do you want, human?" "I want you to leave this ship alone. Take me instead if you need a prize, but let the go." The commander laughed. It was an ugly sound. "Why would I accept such a trade? I can destroy you both and lose nothing." "Because you owe me a debt," Daniel said. 3 years ago at the Battle of Nexus Point, I had your captain at my mercy. One shot and he would have been dead. Instead, I let him live. I told him that among humans, a life saved creates a bond that cannot be broken." He paused. "Your captain is now your commander, and he remembers." The channel went silent. Daniel waited, his hands steady on the controls. Behind him there was burning. Its shields were almost gone. One more hit and it would be over. Finally, the commander spoke. "You speak of old ways, ways that my people have not followed for generations." "But you remember them," Daniel said. "Your grandmother taught them to you, just as mine taught them to me. Some things are too important to forget." Another long pause. Daniel could feel his heart beating in his chest. Every second felt like an hour. "You are a strange creature, Daniel Carter. You fight like a demon and speak like a priest. I do not understand you." "You do not have to understand me. You just have to honor the debt." The commander was silent for a very long time. Then he spoke again. "Go, take your burning ship and leave. The debt is paid." Daniel let out a breath he did not know he was holding. "Thank you." "Do not thank me, human. If we meet again, I will kill you." "I would expect nothing less." The warship powered down its weapons and turned away. Slowly, impossibly, it moved off into the darkness of space and disappeared. Daniel sat in his damaged shuttle for a long moment. Then he turned around and headed back to the... When he landed in the shuttle bay, the whole crew was waiting for him. They stood in rows along the walls, watching as he climbed out of his shuttle. No one spoke. No one moved. Then he saw. She was standing at the front of the crowd, holding something in her arms. It took Daniel a moment to recognize it. His armor. Walked toward him slowly. Her face was still hard to read, but there was something different in her eyes, something he had never seen before. She stopped in front of him and knelt down. This was the highest gesture of respect. It meant that she was placing herself below him. It meant that she was acknowledging his worth. She set the armor at his feet. "I was wrong," she said. Her voice was quiet but clear enough for everyone to hear. "I was wrong about you, about humans, about everything." Daniel looked at the armor, then he looked at. "Why?" he asked. "Why now?" "Because I finally understand," she said. "You did not risk your life for respect or glory. You did it because you could not do anything else, because protecting others is not a choice for you. It is who you are." She stood up and looked him in the eye. "The Coalition needs people like you. The galaxy needs people like you, and I need you on this ship." Daniel thought about everything that had happened, the years of silence, the harsh words, the pain of being invisible. Then he thought about the people he had saved, the lives that still needed protecting, the work that still needed to be done. He bent down and picked up the armor. Piece by piece he put it back on. The chest plate with its engraved names, the shoulder guards, the gauntlets, every piece fit perfectly, like it had been waiting for him to return. When he was done, he looked at. "I am not doing this for you," he said. "I am not doing this for respect or acceptance. I am doing this because there are still people who need help, and as long as that is true, I will be here." Nodded, "I understand." Daniel walked past her through the crowd of silent crew members. They watched him go with something new in their eyes, not just respect, something deeper, something that looked like hope. He reached the observation deck and stopped to look at the stars. They were still there, still burning, still beautiful. And Daniel Carter was still standing. Not because anyone asked him to, not because anyone thanked him, but because that was who he had always been. A human among the stars. And that was enough.